Number 1. The Pink Lady, Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville, North Carolina, 1913. The Grove Park Inn opened against the Blue Ridge Mountains, built from massive granite stones under medicine maker Edwin Wiley Grove. Presidents, writers, and wealthy travelers came each year for the cool mountain air. Years later, guests spoke of a woman in pink who moved through the halls as softly as mountain fog. The legend places her visit in the 1920s when orchestras played and gowns swept across the Grand Palm Court. One tale says the young woman fell from a balcony and never truly left. No record has proved her name or the event, but the story settled around room 545. There, visitors report a pink mist, a warm breeze, or the faint scent of flowers nearby. Children seem to notice her most. Families have told of small hands being gently tickled, blankets being tugged, or an unseen visitor joining a quiet game. In 1996, the hotel studied years of reports and found that many centered on room 545, 2 floors above the Palm Court. Even nervous guests often describe the feeling there as playful, calm, and kind. That is why the Pink Lady feels different from most hotel ghosts. She does not chase people from the building. She seems to welcome them inside. Late at night, when the stone corridors grow still and mountain wind presses at the windows, a guest may feel someone pass without hearing a step. Then comes a trace of roses, and the long hallway is empty again. Number 2. Sally Carter, Huntsville, Alabama. Huntsville, Alabama, 1823. Planter Stephen Ewing completed Cedarhurst, a brick mansion on land outside the young town. 14 years later, local tradition says 15-year-old Sally Carter came to visit relatives there. She became ill and died in November 1837, only weeks before her 16th birthday, and was buried in the family cemetery. For decades, Cedarhurst remained a private home. Then, in 1919, a teenage guest reportedly woke from a vivid dream in which Sally stood beside his bed. She did not threaten him. She simply asked that someone repair her fallen gravestone. The next morning, the family walked to the small burial ground and found the marker tipped over, just as he had described. Later, Sally became the mansion's gentle helper. Residents said a room might be tidier after everyone left. A drawer might close by itself, or an object might appear where it belonged. Footsteps sometimes crossed the upper floor, light and quick, though no one was there. The reports made her seem less like an intruder than a child caring for the house. Time changed Cedarhurst, and repeated visitors damaged the old grave until the burial site was eventually moved from public reach. Yet Sally's name stayed tied to the mansion. On quiet nights, people still imagine a young girl pausing at the top of the stairs, checking that every room is in order. Then the floorboards settle, and her unseen work is finished. Number 3. The Gray Man, Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Pawleys Island, South Carolina, 1822. A powerful hurricane drove water across the low, flat coast, tearing at homes and leaving the marshes changed. From that disaster grew the story of the Gray Man. In the best-known version, a young traveler hurried toward the island to see his fiancée, but his horse sank in deep pluff mud before he could reach her. Not long afterward, the grieving woman saw a figure in a gray coat walking the beach. He warned her to leave before the storm arrived, then faded into the sea mist. She obeyed. When the hurricane passed, her family's home was said to be standing while nearby buildings were damaged. From then on, seeing the gray man became a warning rather than a curse. The legend returned whenever the Atlantic grew dangerous. Before Hurricane Hazel in 1954 and Hurricane Hugo in 1989, residents reported a gray shape moving near the surf. After Hugo, Jim, and Clara Moore told national television that they had seen him before evacuating. Their house survived, while severe damage struck much of Pawleys Island around them. No document can prove who the gray man was, and older versions give him different names. Still, his purpose never changes. He walks before the wind rises, urging people away from the water. On a calm evening, the beach feels open and harmless. But when clouds darken offshore, locals remember the gray coat and watch the empty shoreline closely at night. Number 4. Octavia Hatcher, Pikeville, Kentucky. Pikeville, Kentucky, 1891. In a mountain town, Octavia Smith Hatcher was still a young bride when grief entered her home. She had married businessman James Hatcher in 1889, but their infant son, Jacob, died early in 1891. Soon afterward, Octavia became weak, stopped responding, and slipped into a deep coma that doctors of the day could not explain. Octavia was declared dead on May 2nd and buried on the hill above town. Days later, other people in Pikeville fell into similar sleep-like states and later awoke. Fear spread that Octavia had suffered the same illness. In the legend, James ordered the grave opened and found signs that she had awakened inside, though no surviving record proves that scene. What history does confirm is the family's loss and the monument James placed over her grave. The life-sized marble figure shows Octavia seated with a child beside her, looking quietly across Pikeville. James later became known for his fear of premature burial and even kept a specially designed coffin, helping the darker story grow with each generation. Local folklore softened that sorrow into something protective. Parents said Octavia watched over children playing below the cemetery hill, as though guarding the childhood her own family lost. Visitors still climb to the tall monument and find her marble eyes facing the town. Number 5. Joe Baldwin and the Mako Light, Mako, North Carolina. Near Mako, North Carolina, January the 4th, 1856. Two trains of the Wilmington and Manchester Railroad collided on a wet night near Rattlesnake Grade. A railroad worker named Charles Baldwin suffered terrible head injuries and died days later. Newspapers recorded that real accident, but memory slowly changed Charles into the legendary conductor called Joe. In the folklore, Joe's car broke loose from his train while another engine rushed up behind it. Seeing the danger, he stood on the rear platform and swung his lantern through the rain, trying to warn the other crew. The collision came before the signal could save him. Afterward, travelers reported a light that bobbed over the rails with no person beneath it. The Mako light became one of North Carolina's best-known ghost stories. Some witnesses saw one lantern. Others claimed two lights moved together. In 1889, even President Grover Cleveland reportedly noticed the strange glow while his train stopped nearby. Explanations ranged from swamp gas and reflections to distant headlights, but none ended the tale. The tracks were removed in the 1970s, and reports of the light faded soon afterward. Still, the history beneath the legend remains: a real railroad, a real wreck, and a worker whose name was reshaped by storytelling. On rainy nights, people remember the lantern moving down the old right-of-way, as if Joe or Charles is still giving one last warning. Number 6. Helen Johnstone, the Bride of Annandale. Madison County, Mississippi, May 1859. Helen Johnstone was preparing to marry Henry Gray Vick, a wealthy planter related to Vicksburg's founding family. Their wedding was set for May 21st, Helen's 20th birthday, at the Chapel of the Cross. Then, only days before the ceremony, Henry was killed in a duel, and celebration turned to mourning. Family tradition says Helen wore her wedding gown to Henry's funeral. He was buried beside the red brick chapel, in a grave said to have been made wide enough for two. The image of a bride standing over an unfinished future became the heart of the legend. Later, storytellers claimed she returned to the grave each evening, still dressed in white. History gives Helen a life beyond that sorrow. Mississippi archives show that she married the Reverend George Carroll Harris in 1862, raised 3 children, and lived until 1917. Those records correct the popular claim that she mourned Henry alone for the rest of her days. Yet they do not erase the love story that the chapel grounds have carried for generations. After sunset, visitors sometimes report a pale woman seated near Henry's stone or moving beneath the old trees without making a sound. Perhaps moonlight catches a dress-colored flower, or memory completes the shape. Still, the empty place beside Henry's grave feels like a promise that was never used, and the Bride of Annandale keeps walking through the story. Number 7. Père Antoine, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans, 1774. A Spanish Capuchin friar named Antonio de Sedela arrived in a city still ruled by Spain. People soon called him Père Antoine. He served at the church that became St. Louis Cathedral through fires, rebuilding, epidemics, and Louisiana's transfer to the United States. His life became tied to the French Quarter. Père Antoine was remembered for visiting prisoners, aiding poor families, and serving free and enslaved people alike. Cathedral records connect him to thousands of baptisms, marriages, and funerals. He baptized Marie Laveau as a child and officiated at her 1819 wedding. By old age, the red-bearded friar in a plain robe had become one of the city's familiar figures. He died on January 19, 1829, after more than 50 years in New Orleans, and was buried inside the cathedral 3 days later. The alley beside the church eventually took his name, Stories soon placed him there again, a dark-robed shape walking before dawn, pausing near the cathedral doors, or passing through the narrow lane while the city was still quiet. Witnesses rarely describe fear. Instead, they speak of calm, a sudden warmth. Number 8. Alice Riley, Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, early 1734. Alice Riley arrived among 40 Irish transport servants bought for the new Georgia colony. She and Richard White were sent to work on Hutchinson Island under William Wise, an overseer who had reached Georgia only months earlier. What happened there is partly hidden because the colony's court records have not survived. Wise was killed in March, and Riley and White were convicted of murder on May 11th. They escaped custody, but both were recaptured. White was executed first while still denying guilt. Riley's sentence was delayed because she was pregnant. She gave birth to a boy named James on December 21st, then faced the gallows a few weeks later. On January 19, 1735, Alice became the first woman executed in Georgia. A surviving letter says she denied the murder to the end. Her infant died the following month. Later tradition placed her hanging in today's Wright Square, although researchers have found no period document proving that location. The uncertainty left room for sympathy, argument, and ghost lore. People now tell of a misty woman crossing Wright Square after dark, sometimes asking mothers whether they have seen her missing child. The figure vanishes before anyone can answer. Perhaps the tale grew from the sorrow recorded in a few old letters, a servant, a disputed crime, and a baby left behind. Savannah remembers Alice not with certainty, but with an unanswered plea. Number 9. Zona Heaster Shue, the Greenbrier Ghost. Greenbrier County, West Virginia, January 1897. A boy entered the home of newlyweds Zona Heaster Shue and Edward Shue and found Zona lying dead. The doctor made only a brief examination. Edward held her head, dressed her in a high collar and heavy veil, and resisted closer inspection. Her death was ruled natural. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, would not accept that answer. She later said Zona appeared beside her bed on 4 nights and described how Edward had attacked her and broken her neck. Mary carried the story to the county prosecutor. He did not rely on a ghost alone. He questioned witnesses, noticed Edward's strange behavior, and requested Zona's exhumation. The autopsy found a broken neck and a crushed windpipe. Edward went on trial in June 1897. Prosecutors used physical evidence and witness accounts, but his own lawyer brought up Mary's visions while trying to weaken her testimony. She would not change a word. After about an hour, the jury found Edward guilty of first-degree murder and sent him to prison for life. A state marker later called it the only known case in which a ghost's testimony helped convict a murderer. More precisely, the spirit story pushed a determined mother to demand an investigation. Number 10. Marie Laveau, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans, September 10th, 1801. Marie Laveau was born free in the French Quarter descended from African and European families shaped by colonial Louisiana. At 18, she married Jacques Paris, a free carpenter from Saint-Domingue at Saint Louis Cathedral. After he disappeared or died, records called her the Widow Paris. Marie later built a household with Christophe Glapion and became the city's famous voodoo leader. She advised people of several races and social classes, led ceremonies, and remained a devoted Catholic. Newspapers and oral history remembered her as a healer, counselor, and woman with an unusual reach across a city divided by wealth, race, and law. Her ceremonies filled her St. Anne Street home and the shores of Lake Pontchartrain. Some citizens sought charms or advice. Others came simply because Marie seemed to know what happened behind closed doors. Rumor claimed that hairdressing clients and a wide network of helpers supplied her secrets. Whatever the method, her name carried authority far beyond her St. Anne Street home. Marie died on June 15, 1881, and was placed in the Widow Paris tomb in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. Number 11. Alice Flagg, Murrells Inlet, South Carolina. Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, around 1849. Alice Boleyn. Flagg belonged to a wealthy family connected with Wachesaw Plantation and the seaside home called the Hermitage. Local tradition says she fell in love with a young man her family considered beneath her position. He gave Alice a ring, but their courtship had to remain hidden beneath her family's eyes. Alice reportedly wore the ring on a ribbon beneath her dress while attending school in Charleston. When malaria or another fever left her dangerously ill, she was brought home. Her brother, Dr. Allard Flagg, discovered the hidden ring as she lay weak and removed it. Some versions say he threw it into a creek. Others say its fate was never known. Alice died while still very young and was buried at All Saints Church near Pawleys Island. Her plain stone bears only the name Alice, a detail that helped the story spread. Visitors began reporting a white-clad woman moving through the Hermitage grounds, along the marsh edge, or between the old churchyard stones with one hand held near her throat. People still leave rings and flowers beside Alice's grave, hoping to return what was taken from her. Some walk backward around the stone while making a wish, though that custom came long after her life. When a pale figure appears beneath the old live oaks, the legend says she is not seeking revenge. She is searching the grass for one small promise of love. Number 12. Sally White, San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio, March 28, 1876. Sally White worked in the busy guest rooms as a chambermaid at the Menger Hotel, which William and Mary Menger had opened beside the Alamo in 1859. Hotel accounts identify Sally as a black employee and record the violence that ended her life. Her husband shot her, and she died from her wounds 2 days later, on March 30th. The Menger's surviving ledger gives the story an unusual piece of proof. Management paid for Sally's coffin and grave, describing her as a deceased chambermaid murdered by her husband. That brief entry shows that she was valued by the people around her, even though official records preserved almost nothing else about her work, family, or daily life. Years later, employees and guests began seeing a woman in a long skirt, white apron, and headcloth, carrying towels through the older halls. She sometimes entered a room without knocking, then disappeared when spoken to. Fresh sheets were reported moved. Doors opened quietly, and housekeeping carts seemed to shift when no living worker stood nearby. Over time, the sightings turned Sally into the hotel's most familiar spirit, still completing a shift that ended in 1876. Her story is sad, but the ghost is rarely described as threatening. Late at night, a guest may hear measured steps stop beside the door and expect clean towels. When the door opens, the long hallway is empty, neat, and perfectly still. Number 13. Theodosia Burr Alston, Nags Head, North Carolina. Georgetown, South Carolina, December 31st, 1812. Theodosia Burr Alston boarded the schooner Patriot for New York. She was the educated daughter of former Vice President Aaron Burr and the wife of South Carolina Governor Joseph Alston. Ill and grieving the recent death of her only child, she hoped the journey would reunite her with her father. The Patriot had once served as a privateer, but was stripped of its guns for the voyage north. After leaving Georgetown, the ship and everyone aboard vanished. British naval records describe a fierce storm near Cape Hatteras on January 2nd, 1813, making shipwreck the strongest explanation. No confirmed wreckage survivor or final message was ever found. Decades later, Outer Banks stories claimed that wreckers or pirates had taken the ship. In 1869, a doctor at Nag's Head received an old portrait from a local woman who said it came from a wreck during the War of 1812. Some Burr relatives saw a resemblance to Theodosia, while others could not identify her. The painting deepened the mystery without solving it. Folklore then placed a graceful woman walking the beaches, watching the Atlantic as though waiting for a ship or searching for the lost portrait. Wind may shape fog into a gown, and moonlight can turn sea foam into a face. Number 14. Jean Lafitte, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans, 1810. Jean Lafitte and his older brother Pierre were already tied to smuggling along the Gulf Coast. Jean later led the Baratarians, a mixed group of privateers operating from Grande Terre in Barataria Bay. They moved goods outside federal law, including enslaved people, while merchants quietly profited from their hidden trade. In September 1814, British officers offered Lafitte money and rank if he helped them attack Louisiana. He warned American officials instead and offered his men ammunition and knowledge of the wetlands. General Andrew Jackson first distrusted him, but Baratarian cannon crews helped defend the city during the campaign ending at New Orleans on January 8, 1815. Lafitte received a presidential pardon, then returned to smuggling, and later operated from Galveston. His final fate remains uncertain. The old building called Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop on Bourbon Street is traditionally linked to the brothers, although proof that Jean ever used it as a headquarters is thin. Its dark brick rooms gave the legend a perfect home. Patrons report a tall, dark-eyed man standing near the fireplace or watching silently from a shadowed corner. When someone approaches, the figure slips away without opening a door. Whether the visitor is Lafitte or only candlelight moving over uneven walls, the story suits a man who escaped every clear ending. The privateer still keeps his secrets. Number 15. The Gray Lady, Frankfort, Kentucky. Frankfort, Kentucky, July 1817. 72-year-old Margaretta Varick arrived at Liberty Hall after a difficult journey from New York. She had once helped raise her niece, Margaretta Brown, and stopped to comfort her after the death of a child. Varick planned to continue west to Illinois, where her own son still lived, but she never completed the trip. Only 2 days after reaching the Brown family home, she became violently ill and died in an upstairs bedroom on the third night. A heart attack was suspected, though the exact cause remains unknown. Family tradition says she arrived wearing a gray traveling cloak, practical protection against dust from the boats, roads, and carriages of the long journey. The earliest stories placed her spirit inside Liberty Hall. In the 1880s, young Mary Mason Scott awoke to a rustling sound and saw a tall, gray-veiled woman leaning over her bed. Mary reached toward the visitor, but her hand passed through the figure. Her scream brought relatives running with a fireplace poker and a gun, only to find the room empty. Other reports describe doors closing, books shifting, or the gray lady looking from an upper window. She is not treated as an enemy, but as an aunt still checking on the family she came to comfort. Number 16. Little Gracie Watson, Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia, July 10, 1882. Gracie Perry Watson was born to W.J. and Frances Watson. Her father managed the Pulaski House, a well-known city hotel, and Gracie grew up among travelers, bellmen, and busy parlors. Guests remembered the only child as cheerful and curious, often singing, dancing, or talking with anyone who stopped to listen. In April 1889, Gracie became ill with pneumonia and died at only 6 years old. Her parents buried her at Bonaventure Cemetery beneath live oaks draped in Spanish moss. Heartbroken, her father asked Savannah sculptor John Walls to carve a life-sized marble image from a photograph. The finished statue showed Gracie seated calmly, one hand resting on a tree stump. Her parents later left Savannah, but the little figure remained. Visitors began bringing flowers, coins, dolls, and small toys to the grave. Some claimed the gifts changed places overnight. Others heard a child giggling beyond the fence, or saw a girl in a white dress dart between the stones, only to disappear where the shaded path curved. No record proves that Gracie haunts Bonaventure, yet her monument makes the legend feel close and personal. The marble face is not an angel or a symbol. It is the likeness of a real child lost in 1889. When evening settles beneath the oaks, toys rest at her feet, leaves whisper overhead. Number 17. Julia Lagar, Edisto Island, South Carolina. Edisto Island, South Carolina, 1852. 22-year-old Julia Lagar died and was placed in her family's stone mausoleum beside the Presbyterian Church. The congregation dated to the colonial era, while the present church had stood since 1831. Julia's early death was real, but the frightening details told about it came later through island tradition. According to the legend, diphtheria left Julia in a deep coma that looked like death. Her family sealed her inside the tomb, believing there was no hope. 2 years later, the mausoleum was opened for another burial. The story says Julia's bones were found near the doorway rather than inside her coffin, as though she had awakened and tried to escape. Then the heavy stone door began refusing to stay closed. Church members reportedly secured and chained it, yet found it open again. Marks on its inner surface were said to resemble scratches. At last the door was left lying beside the tomb, giving the restless young woman the freedom that the legend says she had once fought to reach. No surviving medical report or family letter confirms that Julia was buried alive, and historians treat the account as folklore rather than proven fact. Still, the open mausoleum stands beneath Edisto's great oaks, its fallen door beside it. When cold wind passes through the empty entrance, visitors understand why the island decided Julia would never be shut inside again. Number 18. Charlie Wunsche, Spring, Texas. Spring, Texas, 1902. Brothers Charlie and Del Wunsche opened a wooden hotel and saloon beside the railroad tracks. They used lumber cut at the Wunsche family mill and served railroad crews, travelers, and people passing through the town. Before long, the tall building became a meeting place in the community that grew into Old Town Spring. Prohibition ended the saloon's busiest years, and the family eventually sold the property in 1949. It became a cafe, but much of the old woodwork survived through decades of meals, music, and changing owners. Charlie's name also remained. Local stories say the former owner returned after death because he could not quite leave the building he had helped raise. Workers have blamed Charlie for lights switching on, doors closing, silverware moving, and footsteps crossing the empty second floor. One curtain may lift without a breeze, or a drawer may slide open after closing time. Some visitors have described dusty shoe prints that begin in the middle of a clean floor and stop before reaching any doorway. The reports are usually playful, not threatening. Even a 2015 fire spared the original saloon section, and later owners restored the landmark rather than abandoning it. Number 19. Captain Richard King, Kingsville, Texas. South Texas, 1853. Steamboat Captain Richard King purchased land along Santa Gertrudis Creek in the dry Wild Horse Desert. Born in New York City in 1824, he had worked on rivers from Florida to the Rio Grande before turning toward cattle. With partners and his wife, Henrietta, King built the scattered holdings into the ranch that carried his name. King brought longhorns from Mexico, sent herds north after the Civil War, and registered the Running W brand in 1869. He also invited families from Cruyas, Mexico, to settle on the ranch and work with its horses and cattle. Their descendants became known as Los Queneños, the King's people, whose skill helped the ranch survive drought and isolation. Captain King died in 1885. The present main house did not exist during his lifetime. It was completed in 1915 after an earlier residence burned. Even so, ranch tradition places his spirit around the headquarters. People tell of steady footsteps in silent corridors, a man's shadow near the study, or the sense that someone has paused to inspect the land beyond a window. That correction makes the legend stronger. King cannot be returning to a room he once used in that later house, but the ranch itself was his life's great work. When boots seem to cross a silent floor and stop before dawn, the story says he is not lost. Number 20. Alice Flagler, St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine, Florida, 1888. The Hotel Ponce de Leon opened as Henry Flagler's grand winter resort. Its poured concrete walls, electric lights, Tiffany glass, painted ceilings, and Spanish Renaissance towers amazed visitors. Beside Flagler during those early years was his second wife, Ida Alice Showards Flagler, called Alice in later ghost stories. The couple had married in 1883, before his Florida empire reached its height. During the 1890s, Ida Alice suffered a serious mental health crisis and spent years in medical care. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1901 under a controversial Florida law. She remained in treatment in the North and died at 82 in 1930, far from St. Augustine. Later folklore brought Alice back to the hotel. Students and employees have described a graceful woman moving through the dining hall, standing beneath the rotunda dome, or fading near a former guest room. Some reports add lavender or say decorations shift after dark. No solid record connects her to seances inside the Ponce, despite modern retellings. The old resort became the center of Flagler College in 1968, but its Gilded Age rooms still hold the atmosphere of another world. When footsteps cross a balcony after the doors are locked, some blame Henry, others name Alice. Her real life was more complex and sadder than the legend, yet the quiet figure remains, wandering the palace built during her marriage. Number 21. Julie, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans, around the 1850s, Royal Street was lined with townhouses, iron balconies, shops, and homes shaped by strict racial laws. From that world came the legend of Julie, a mixed-race woman living at 734 Royal Street. No archive has confirmed her full name or identity, so her story belongs to folklore rather than proven biography. The tale says, Julie loved a wealthy white man who would not marry her. One cold December night, he challenged her to remain on the rooftop until morning as proof of her devotion. She climbed above the quiet French Quarter and waited while the temperature fell. By dawn, the man had forgotten or ignored the promise, and Julie was found lifeless in the cold. Later, residents claimed they heard pacing overhead when no one stood on the roof. Others saw a woman in a long dress near the chimney, staring into the courtyard before fading. The story was repeated by guides and neighbors until Julie became part of Royal Street itself, though its details changed with every teller, and no early newspaper has settled them. Her legend survives because it reflects more than one lost romance. It remembers a city where race and social rank could decide which loves were accepted and which remained hidden. On the coldest December nights, people still glance toward the rooftop at 734 Royal. Sometimes a pale shape seems to wait there, holding one promise that morning never kept even now. Number 22, Julia Brown, Manchac Swamp, Louisiana. Frenier, Louisiana, 1915. Aunt Julia Brown was a landowning black woman who lived near Manchac's cypress swamps. Born around 1845, she married Celestine Brown in 1880 and later held their 40-acre homestead. Neighbors remembered her folk remedies and the songs she sang from her porch in a place with few roads, doctors, or easy supplies. One song gained a darker meaning. One day I'm going to die and take the whole town with me. Julia died of old age, and her funeral was held on September 29, 1915. That same day, a Category 4 hurricane struck southeastern Louisiana with violent winds and storm surge. Mourners fled her house as the weather tore through Frenier and nearby Ruddock. The destruction was real. Ruddock lost 58 residents, and both communities were swept apart. A newspaper reported that Julia's wooden burial box was recovered, but her casket had disappeared. Soon people said her song had predicted the storm or caused it. History offers a hurricane. Folklore adds a warning from a woman whose words suddenly sounded like a curse. Today, swamp guides tell of Julia's spirit moving through the mist or guiding lost boaters between dark trees. A stage marker sometimes shown as her grave has also helped the story grow. Number 23, Fatty Walsh, Coral Gables, Florida. Coral Gables, Florida, March 7th, 1929. The Biltmore Hotel was only 3 years old, its tower above a city built during Florida's land boom. In that tower, an illegal gambling room drew wealthy visitors and underworld figures.
You owe me everything.
Before dawn, an argument broke out. Gunfire followed, and Thomas Fatty Walsh fell beside the gaming tables. Walsh was no harmless jazz-age guest. He had worked as a bodyguard for New York gambler Arnold Rothstein and moved among bootleggers and gangsters. Another man was wounded, but frightened witnesses gave changing stories. Police suspected gambling operator Eddie Wilson and issued a warrant, yet no trial ever proved who fired the fatal shots or why. Later accounts call the scene the 13th floor, while historical reports describe the 14th floor suite. That difference did little to calm the legend. Guests began reporting cigar smoke with no smoker nearby, elevator doors opening by themselves, or a heavy-set man in old-fashioned clothes appearing near the tower before vanishing around a corner. The Biltmore later served as a military hospital, a veterans hospital, and part of the University of Miami's medical school before returning to hotel life. Through every change, Walsh's story stayed upstairs. Number 24, Beth, Abingdon, Virginia. Abingdon, Virginia, 1861. General Francis Preston's 1830s home had become Martha Washington College for women. When the Civil War reached Southwest Virginia, parts of the school served as a hospital and military quarters. That documented history gave later generations a setting filled with wounded soldiers, nurses, and long nights. The best-known legend tells of Beth, a student who helped care for a captured Union officer called Captain John Stoves. As his condition worsened, he asked her to play the violin. Beth sat beside him and performed a gentle song until he died. The tale says grief and illness soon took her too, leaving the unfinished melody inside the college walls. No surviving public record has confirmed Beth or Captain Stoves, so their romance remains folklore rather than a proven wartime case. The building's other history is certain. It returned to school use, became a hotel in the 1930s, and stood beside the Barter Theater. Yet students, workers, actors, and guests continued reporting music from an empty upper room. Some hear only a few clear notes. Others follow the sound along the third floor until it stops outside a closed door. Old pipes, wind, or distant music may travel strangely through a building that has changed many times. Number 25, The Bell Witch, Adams, Tennessee. Robertson County, Tennessee, around 1817. John and Lucy Bell had farmed beside the Red River since moving from North Carolina in 1804. Then the family began hearing knocks, scratching, and heavy wings beating outside the house. Strange animals appeared near the fields. Blankets slipped from beds, and young Betsy Bell said an unseen hand tugged her hair. The sounds became words. The voice copied neighbors, quoted scripture, sang hymns, and answered visitors. People called it Kate, a name later linked to neighbor Kate Batts. It was kind to Lucy but mocked John and opposed Betsy's marriage to Joshua Gardner. Tradition says Andrew Jackson came to investigate, though no record then proves the visit. John's health declined, and he died on December 20th, 1820. In the tale, the spirit claimed it had poisoned him, then sang at his funeral. By spring 1821, the activity faded after promising to return. Yet most details were written long afterward. The first brief printed mention appeared in 1886, and Martin Ingram's famous full account followed in 1894. That long gap leaves room for every theory: a family prank, neighborhood conflict, illness, belief, or something that no witness understood. The original Bell House is gone, but the legend remains around Adams, the family cemetery, and the nearby cave. Number 26, Major Patrick Ferguson, Kings Mountain, South Carolina. Kings Mountain, South Carolina, October 7th, 1780. Major Patrick Ferguson commanded Loyalist troops on a wooded ridge during the Revolution's Southern campaign. The 36-year-old Scottish officer was already famous for improving a breech-loading rifle that could fire faster than most weapons of its day, even while its shooter crouched in battle. Ferguson had demonstrated the rifle before King George III and led a special corps at Brandywine in 1777, where a musket ball shattered his right arm. By 1780, he was back in the field, recruiting loyalists for Britain. Then frontier militia crossed the mountains, surrounded his position, and climbed the ridge while firing carefully from tree to tree. Ferguson refused calls to surrender. Riding through smoke and confusion, he tried to break the Patriot line before several shots knocked him from his horse. His force soon gave up. Loyalist soldiers buried their commander near the battlefield's base, and stones placed over the grave slowly became the cairn that visitors see beside the trail today. Folklore says the battle never became completely silent. Hikers report a red-coated officer moving between the trees, then disappearing near Ferguson's grave. Some hear a horse or a command when no reenactment is underway. Perhaps wind crosses the ridge like distant voices. Number 27. El Muerto, the Headless Rider of South Texas. South Texas, around 1848. Old frontier accounts tell of a horse thief known as Vidal, whose raids carried him through the rough country between San Antonio and the Nueces River. The details changed as the tale spread, but Texas Ranger William Bigfoot Wallace and veteran John McPeters were often named as the men who followed his trail. According to Creed Taylor's later recollection, the pursuers found Vidal and his companions after a theft and killed them in a fight. Wallace then chose a harsh warning for other rustlers. Vidal's body was fastened upright to a wild Mustang, while his head and sombrero were tied near the saddle. The frightened animal was released into the open brush. Travelers soon encountered the strange rider from a distance. Bullets and arrows reportedly marked the body, yet the Mustang kept roaming until ranchers finally caught it and buried Vidal's remains. That should have ended the story. Instead, soldiers near Fort Ing and lonely travelers began reporting a headless horseman long after the real horse was gone. They called him El Muerto, the Dead One. Later versions moved him across the plains near Uvalde, Alice, San Diego, and Freer, always riding under clear moonlight. The legend grew from brutal frontier justice, not a magical curse, but the warning turned against those who created it. When hooves sound in empty chaparral, South Texas remembers Vidal still riding home. Number 28. Chloe, the Myrtles Plantation, Louisiana. St. Francisville, Louisiana, 1796. Attorney David Bradford built the fine raised cottage later called the Myrtles Plantation. His daughter Sarah married Clark Woodruff, and the family lived there during the early 19th century. From that real household grew the plantation's most famous ghost story, a woman in a green turban known only as Chloe. In the legend, Chloe was an enslaved servant punished after she was caught listening near a private doorway. Hoping to regain the family's trust, she placed oleander in a cake so she could nurse them after they became ill. The plan went wrong, the tale says, and Sarah and 2 children died. Other enslaved people then hanged Chloe and cast her in the river. Historical records clearly tell a different story. Researchers have found no enslaved woman named Chloe in the known Woodruff documents. Sarah died during a yellow fever outbreak, and 2 children died from the same disease in separate months. Mary Octavia, often counted among the supposed victims, survived, married, and lived well into adulthood. Still, guests report a green-wrapped figure crossing the veranda, standing near beds, or appearing in photographs by the house. Some describe her as watchful rather than angry. Chloe may be folklore built from fear, illness, and the hidden lives of enslaved people whose names were poorly preserved. Number 29. The Old Pink Houseboy, Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia, 1771. Construction began on the brick house facing Reynolds Square for merchant and statesman James Habersham Jr. in colonial Savannah. Humid air slowly drew the red color through its plaster, giving the mansion the pink shade that became its name. Through the years, it served as a home, a bank, offices, and finally, a restaurant. Several spirits are attached to the old pink house, but one of the gentlest is a young boy heard near the lower rooms. Some stories call him Thaddeus, others give no name at all. No surviving record securely identifies him or proves that he lived there, so the child belongs to the building's spoken folklore rather than its documented family history. Staff members tell of marbles rolling across wooden boards after closing, soft laughter beneath the stairs, or a small figure slipping around a doorway. Glasses and pieces of silverware may appear where workers need them, inspiring the idea that the boy helps with the evening service. When someone follows the sound, only an empty passage waits beyond. The mystery fits a house that has watched Savannah change for more than 2 centuries. Generations of families, servants, bankers, workers, and diners have crossed its rooms, leaving many possible routes for one child's story. Late at night, when the last table is cleared, a marble may click once across the floor. Then the helpful little guest is gone again. Number 30. The Ghostly Captain of Spook Hill, Lake Wales, Florida. Lake Wales, Florida, around 1950. Motorists began stopping on a short road, now called Spook Hill, in the Florida hills. They lined up at a painted mark, shifted into neutral, and watched their cars appear to roll backward uphill. The trick became a popular roadside attraction after World War II, when Florida families explored the state by automobile. The road is a gravity hill, an optical illusion because the surrounding slope hides the true horizon. What looks like an uphill climb is actually a gentle descent. Yet Lake Wales gave the puzzle several legends. One told of a warrior chief and a giant alligator whose final battle formed the nearby hollow, with a spirit still pushing travelers away. Another story came from a playful 1956 pamphlet connected to a local restaurant. It introduced the pirate Captain Gimme Sarsaparilla and his companion, Teniente Vanilla. After Vanilla was buried near the hill, the captain's ghost rose from Lake Wales to push a parked car away from his friend's resting place. It was advertising, not settler history. That invented captain became part of the attraction, and Spook Hill later earned a place on the National Register of Historic Places. Visitors still test it by stopping, releasing the brake, and feeling the car move the wrong way. Science explains the slope, but not the smile it creates.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.
Mary Wilson was born on a ship crossing the Atlantic in 1720, and the pirate captain who had just raided the vessel agreed to spare the passengers on one condition: that the newborn be named after his mother, Mary. He left a bolt of green brocade silk as a gift. The girl grew up in New Hampshire outlived her husband, and died in Henniker in 1814 at the age of 94. Since then, a woman in colonial dress has been seen near the road in Henniker. A woman named Eunice Cole was accused of witchcraft in Hampton in 1656, arrested, imprisoned, and died alone in poverty, buried face down, as was the custom for the community's most feared dead. The town of Hampton cleared her name in 1938. When the fog rolls in from the sea at Hampton Beach, visitors have seen her walking around. These are 30 ghost legends in New Hampshire. Number 1. Charlie the Helpful Handyman. Meredith, New Hampshire, 1763. The old Eliphalet Rawlings homestead rose on quiet land. Over the years it became many things, and today it is known as the Nutmeg Inn. The beams, floors, and garden paths still carry that early New England feeling. Guests come for peace, but some say one helper never checked out. The spirit is called Charlie, and he is not the kind of ghost who slams doors just to scare people. His legend is softer. Innkeepers have blamed him for finding missing objects, nudging small repairs along, and seeming to help with chores when the house feels too busy. In a place built before America was even a country, that friendly work feels almost natural. Stories say Charlie may have been tied to the old property when it was still a home, farm, or busy stop for travelers. No one knows his full name, and that missing record makes him feel more real, not less. Old houses often remember people who fixed loose boards, carried firewood, and kept rooms warm through long New Hampshire winters. Charlie feels like one of them. So the mystery at the Nutmeg Inn is not dark. It is the strange comfort of a house that seems cared for from the other side. A lost key appears. A creak answers from an empty hall. A stubborn flower finally blooms by the porch. And when the night gets quiet in Meredith, Charlie's legend feels like a hand still working in the walls again. Number 2. Ocean-born Mary. The Atlantic Ocean, 1720. A baby girl was born aboard an immigrant ship before her family reached the New World. Her name became Mary Wilson, later Mary Wallace, but New England called her Ocean-born Mary. Legend says a pirate captain stopped the vessel and spared everyone when the baby was named Mary, after his mother. From the start, her life sounded like legend. Mary grew up in New Hampshire, married James Wallace in 1742, and lived long enough to see her family spread through the hills around Londonderry and Henniker. Records place her death in 1814, in her 90s. People described her as tall, red-haired, sharp-minded, and hard to frighten. Those details helped the ghost story grow real roots. The famous haunting is tied to Henniker, though historians warn that some pirate treasure parts were likely shaped much later by owners of the old Wallace house. That makes the tale even more interesting. It is partly history, partly showmanship, and partly the kind of story a town keeps, because it feels too good to lose. Mary became larger than any one house. Today, people still speak of a tall woman in colonial dress, a flash of red hair near the road, and the smell of roses passing through still air. Maybe it is only memory, dressed in old fabric. Maybe it is a motherly spirit guarding a story born at sea. Either way, ocean-born Mary still feels like New Hampshire folklore opening the door again. Number 3. Joshua Card. Newcastle Island, 1874. Joshua Kenny Card became keeper of Portsmouth Harbor Light, watching the Piscataqua River where tides, fog, and ships could turn dangerous fast. He had already served at lonely Boone Island Light, so he knew what a keeper's life required. Lamps had to be tended, lenses cleaned, storms watched, and the harbor could not be left in darkness. Card stayed at Portsmouth Harbor until 1909, a service so long that people later called him one of the oldest lighthouse keepers in the country when he retired. For more than 3 decades, his days followed the rhythm of the sea. When fog rolled in, the light mattered. When ships came home, that beacon was more than a tower. It was a promise. The ghost story says Captain Card never fully gave up his rounds. Visitors and volunteers have told of footsteps on stairs, shadows near the lantern room, and a voice where no person should be. In a lighthouse, those details land differently. Every sound climbs the iron steps. Every draft feels like a breath, and every night watch seems to belong to someone. It is not about a spirit trying to frighten the coast. It is about duty lasting longer than life. The harbor light still faces the dark water, steady and watchful. And when the wind moves through Newcastle after sunset, it is easy to imagine that keeper checking the beam one more time. Number 4. Sister Marguerite. Canterbury, New Hampshire. The Shaker village was built on order, work, and faith. Men and women lived simply, shared labor, and believed daily tasks could become sacred. In workshops, barns, kitchens, and meeting rooms, every tool had a place. That is why Sister Marguerite's stories feel so Shaker, even now. Marguerite Frost joined the Canterbury Shakers as a child and spent more than 60 years in the community. She taught, served, and later helped lead as the village changed around her. By the 20th century, fewer Shakers remained, but the old buildings still held the rhythm of sweeping floors, folding cloth, making food, and keeping everything neat. Her life was tied to that order. After her death, people began to speak of small but stubborn signs. Clamps, looms, and heavy wooden items were said to shift inside locked rooms. A butter churn might appear carefully placed in the center of a workroom, as if someone was correcting the display. Nothing felt wild. It felt exact, quiet, and almost polite, like a sister still finishing her chores. The mystery of Sister Marguerite is gentle. Canterbury does not need chains rattling in the night. It has clean wooden floors, pale walls, and rooms where silence feels busy. If something moves after dark, the story says it may not be mischief. It may be Marguerite keeping the old order alive. Number 5. Chief Passa Conway. Before roads climbed the White Mountains, Passa Conway was remembered as a great Pennacook leader of the Merrimack Valley. In the 1600s, he was a sachem and diplomat, guiding his people through changing alliances, English settlements, and old rivalries. His name stayed powerful because he was more than a warrior. He was a peacemaker. Folklore gave him a final journey worthy of the mountains. When Passaconaway was very old, a sled drawn by wolves came for him. Wrapped in skins, he crossed frozen lakes and dark valleys toward Agiokachuk, the great mountain now called Mount Washington. There the sled rose in fire and light, carrying him into the sky like a spirit returning home. Historians know the story changed as it passed through English writers, travelers, and local memory. Some details may have been added later, and some may mix older native beliefs with White Mountain legend. But the heart of the tale remains clear. The highest peak became a place of honor, and Passaconaway became part of the landscape itself. The mountain kept his name alive. That is why his legend still feels different from an ordinary ghost story. It is not a haunted room or a knocking sound. It is a whole mountain holding a memory. When clouds cover Mount Washington and the wind runs hard over the rocks, people can still imagine wolf tracks crossing the snow, climbing higher and higher until they disappear into stars. Number 6. Carolyn Stickney. Bretton Woods, 1902. The Mount Washington Hotel opened like a palace at the foot of the White Mountains. Railroad man Joseph Stickney built it with grand halls, bright verandas, and views of Mount Washington. His wife, Carolyn Foster Stickney, helped shape its elegant life, and guests arrived in fine clothes for long summer stays. After Joseph died, Carolyn later married a French nobleman and became known as a princess. Yet her name stayed tied to the hotel. Room 314, once connected to her private spaces, became the heart of the legend. Guests speak of a woman in Victorian dress, light taps on doors, missing things that return, and a soft perfume in the air. The story works because Carolyn belonged to that world of polished floors, dinner bells, and mountain air. She knew the hotel when it was young, when steam trains brought visitors to Bretton Woods, and the resort stood as a symbol of luxury in northern New Hampshire. Decades later, in 1944, world leaders met there for the Bretton Woods Conference, giving the place another famous chapter. If any spirit would still glide through those halls, people say it would be hers. So the haunting is not a scream in the dark. It is quieter than that. A brush of scent, a figure at the edge of a bed, a door touched by no hand. Number 7. Eunice Cole. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1640s. Eunice Cole lived in a small Puritan town where fear could become law. She and her husband, William, had come north from Massachusetts, but peace never lasted. Neighbors called her difficult, courts punished her for quarrels, and by 1656 the word witch was placed on her like a heavy stone. At her first witchcraft trial in Boston, 26 witnesses spoke against her. They blamed her for dead cattle, illness, and strange knowledge of private things. She was whipped and imprisoned, then released years later only because Hampton grew tired of paying her jail costs. Old and poor, she came home to a town that still treated her like danger. The accusations followed her into the 1670s and 1680. She was tried again, held in prison, and died not long after her last arrest. Later stories claimed her body was buried with a stake and horseshoe to keep her from rising. In 1938, Hampton finally voted to clear her name and restore her place as a citizen, almost 3 centuries too late. That is why Goody Cole's ghost feels more sad than scary. People say a gray figure still walks near Hampton Beach and Island Path, but the real haunting is history itself. A lonely woman was turned into a warning by fear, then into a legend by memory. Number 8. Laura, the Tilton Inn. Tilton, New Hampshire, 1875. The original inn opened in the busy heart of town, close to the mills, roads, and rail lines that brought visitors through the lakes region. Over time, the building became part hotel, part tavern, and part local landmark. Famous names like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford are said to have passed through its rooms. But the inn's history also carries fire. The building burned more than once, and one old story says a 12-year-old girl named Laura died in one of those blazes. Her family was connected to the inn in the 1800s, in the room now remembered by many guests as the Sanborn Room. That small detail gives the legend a home. It is gentle, but it still changes the room when the lights flicker. Laura is not described as cruel or frightening. She feels more like a child who stayed close to the place she knew. People speak of footsteps in empty halls, small objects moving, and water glasses tipping in the dining room. Sometimes the feeling is not terror at all, but the quick sense that someone young has just run past. That is what makes Laura's story linger in Tilton. The inn still serves travelers, meals, and warm lights on Main Street, while her legend moves quietly between the upstairs rooms and the pub below. Maybe every old building keeps echoes. Maybe Laura is only a memory of fire and childhood. But when a glass shifts by itself, the room seems to hold its breath. Number 9. Blackbeard's Wife. Isles of Shoals, early 1700s. The rocks off the New Hampshire coast were lonely, useful, and dangerous. Fishing boats, traders, and smugglers knew the islands well, and that made them perfect ground for pirate rumors. The most famous name attached to them is Blackbeard, the feared Edward Teach, though historians have never proved he hid treasure there. The legend says he sailed to the shoals, buried riches near Star Island or Lunging Island, and left one of his wives to guard it until he returned. Some tellers call her his 13th bride. Others give her no true name at all. She waited in sea wind, wrapped in dark cloth or white fabric, watching the horizon for a sail that never came. In real history, Blackbeard died in 1718 after a brutal fight near Ocracoke, far to the south in North Carolina waters. That makes the Shoals story feel even colder. If his bride was waiting, she was waiting for a man already gone. Local writers have admitted the tale is better folklore than proof, but that has never stopped people from repeating it. So her ghost remains one of the saddest figures on the islands. Visitors imagine a tall woman on the cliffs, hair blowing in salt air, whispering that he will come back. The treasure may be only rumor. The pirate may never have stood there, but the image of a bride left alone beside the Atlantic still feels true in the way legends often do. It clings to those rocks. Number 10. Madame Sherry. Chesterfield, New Hampshire, 1929. Antoinette Brumaire, better known as Madame Sherry, bought forest land on Gulf Road and began building a strange dream in the woods. She had come from France, worked in New York as a theatrical costume designer, and helped dress the bright world of Broadway. In quiet New Hampshire, she wanted a stage of her own. Her castle was never a medieval fortress. It was a wild party house, part French chalet and part Roman ruin, with a stone stairway climbing to her private rooms. Actors, dancers, and city friends came for music, laughter, and late nights under the trees. Locals watched her arrive in style, wrapped in glamour that seemed too big for a country road. Then the lights went out slowly, money faded, the parties ended. When Madame Sherry returned in 1959, vandals had damaged the house she once filled with guests. A fire destroyed it in the early 1960s, leaving foundation stones, chimneys, and the famous staircase behind. She died in 1965, far from the applause that had shaped her life. Today, the forest has taken back the castle, but not the story. Even now, the 513-acre forest still carries her name. Hikers still find the stairs rising into open air like a scene waiting for actors. Number 11. Abel Blood. Hollis, New Hampshire, 1867. Abel Blood was laid to rest in Pine Hill Cemetery, a quiet burial ground that later earned the nickname Blood Cemetery because of his family name. The place itself is old and wooded, with leaning stones, narrow lanes, and the kind of silence that makes even a bird call feel sudden. In daylight, it can look peaceful. Abel's marker became famous because of one carved detail, a hand with one finger pointing upward, a common Victorian symbol of the soul rising toward heaven. But local legend says the hand does not stay that way. By night, people claim the finger points down instead, as if the stone has changed its mind about where Abel went. The story grew with other reports around the cemetery. Some visitors told of soft tapping near the graves, pale lights drifting between stones, or the strange feeling of being watched from the road. Skeptics say shadows, old carvings, and teenage dares did the work. The headstone was later damaged by vandals, which only made the legend feel more unfinished and harder to check. It is one small symbol on one old stone, but it asks a question that feels bigger than the cemetery. Did the carving only fool the eye in moonlight, or did something in Hollis truly turn the hand downward after dark? The woods give no answer. They just stand there. Few leave without looking back. Number 12. Hannah Hill. Durham, New Hampshire, 1649. Valentine Hill built a homestead near the Oyster River, where sawmills, timber, and river traffic helped shape the young settlement. The house survived wars, changing owners, and long centuries of New England weather. Today it stands as Three Chimneys Inn, one of the oldest homes in the state. Its age is part of the spell. The spirit most often named there is Hannah Hill, remembered in legend as Valentine's daughter. The story says she drowned in the Oyster River and that her sadness never fully left the house. Guests do not describe her as cruel. They speak instead of a playful presence that touches doors, moves glasses, and seems curious about modern machines. That detail fits the place. 3 Chimneys carries many layers. Colonial trade, the 1694 raid on Oyster River, later additions, gardens, wells, and a long life before it became an inn. A house that old is not just wood and stone. It is work, family, danger, and memory pressed together until every hallway seems to listen closely. So Hannah's haunting feels like a small voice inside a very old building. A glass drops without breaking. A woman feels a gentle touch at her hair and turns to an empty room. Maybe it is only the house settling. But at 3 Chimneys Inn, the past has had more than 3 centuries to learn how to speak, and that quiet makes the tale feel close now. Number 13, The Phantom Cat. Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, 1837. The Amos J. Blake House was built as a store with living quarters attached, a practical place for business, family, and town life. Amos Blake later became a respected local lawyer, official, and state legislator. Today the building serves as a museum, but its quiet rooms carry stranger stories too. The shelves seem to watch. Among the reported spirits is not a person at all, but a phantom cat. Volunteers and visitors have spoken of soft meows in empty rooms, the brush of fur against an ankle, and a small shadow slipping near furniture before vanishing. In a museum full of old objects, that tiny sound can feel louder than a scream. For a moment, even grown visitors wonder if an unseen pet has chosen them. Quiet. The cat's legend shares the house with other tales. A young boy named Bobby, a stern older presence, doors that move, chains that shift, and toys found scattered after being set in place. Paranormal teams have visited, but the best stories still come from people who expected nothing and then felt something small and living pass by. That is why the phantom cat is so memorable. It is not a grand ghost on a staircase or a face in a window. It is a quick touch, a little cry, a shape at floor level, gone before the mind can argue. In the Amos Blake house, history does not only stand behind glass. Sometimes people say it rubs against your ankles in the dark. Number 14, Nancy Barton. Crawford Notch, 1778. 16-year-old Nancy Barton worked in Jefferson, New Hampshire, and believed she was about to marry a man named Jim. According to the old tale, she trusted him with her savings, hoping they would build a life together in Portsmouth. Instead, he left with her money and disappeared into winter. The betrayal moved fast. Nancy would not wait by the fire. She set out on foot through the White Mountains, following a rough, snowy trail for miles. Neighbors warned her to turn back, but heartbreak and anger kept her moving. The cold grew sharper. The path grew harder, and near a brook in Crawford Notch, her strength finally failed. Searchers later found her frozen beside the water. That brook, nearby falls, and even Nancy Pond and Nancy Mountain helped keep her name alive. At the Notchland Inn in Hart's location, her story is remembered with a marker, and guests have reported mirror writing, odd sounds, and a presence that feels more lonely than dangerous. Nancy Barton's legend hurts because it begins with a very human mistake, trusting the wrong person. The mountains did not hate her. They simply did what mountains do in winter. When wind moves through the notch, people still imagine a girl calling across snow, not to scare the living, but to make sure no one forgets how far she walked. That is why her name still sounds personal in the cold air of Crawford Notch. Number 15. The Ghost Ship Isidore. Off the New England coast, 1842, the Isidore sailed from Kennebunkport with a load of lumber bound for New Orleans. Some versions say crewmen had warned of dark dreams before the voyage, but the ship went out anyway. By Thanksgiving night, wind and snow had turned the seas rough, and the coast became a wall of danger. Every mile mattered. The storm drove the vessel toward the rocks near Cape Nettic and Bald Head Cliff, close to the border waters known to New Hampshire sailors too. The Isidore broke apart in the gale, and many aboard were lost. Wreckage and bodies later washed ashore, turning a hard maritime accident into one of the coast's most repeated ghost ship stories. The legend says the Isidore did not sink quietly into the past. Fishermen and shore watchers later claimed to see a pale ship moving through fog, its sails dim, and its shape wrong against the water. Some said it appeared before storms, as if the wreck had become a warning sent back from the rocks. It is a true wreck wrapped in omen, fear, and salt air. The ocean can destroy a ship in one night, then spend generations returning its shadow. When fog hangs low near the Isles of Shoals and the horizon turns white, people still look twice, wondering if the Isidore is sailing home again. That warning keeps the old story sailing long after the wreckage vanished at sea. Number 16. George the Prankster. Concord, New Hampshire. The building at 1 Bicentennial Square did not begin with tacos, bright signs, or families at dinner. From 1890 to 1975, it served as the city police station, with real jail cells built into its stone heart. Today, Margarita's Mexican restaurant uses those cells for tables, but the old walls still remember keys and uneasy nights. The spirit there is known as George, and his favorite trick is not to frighten people badly. Staff have blamed him for sliding glasses, moving furniture, hiding things, and tossing small bits of food when the room should be still. Because the restaurant kept the jail cells, every prank feels tied to the building's older life, as if someone never accepted the change. One local story even connects the site to the 1945 capture of Edgar Cook and John Giles, the so-called toothbrush bandits, who had escaped an Iowa jail with a homemade key before their run ended in Concord. Whether George was ever a prisoner, an officer, or only a name given to strange activity, the setting makes the legend easy to believe. A place once built for locked doors now serves birthday dinners and warm plates, but every so often the past seems to reach across the table. A chair scrapes, a drink shifts, someone laughs, then checks the empty cell beside them. In Concord, George keeps the old jail from becoming just a restaurant. Number 17, Princess Sacco. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the Mount Washington Hotel, opened in 1902 beneath the high, cold face of the White Mountains. Most guests know the famous ghost of Carolyn Stickney, but another legend is sometimes whispered in the halls. It is the tale of Princess Sacco, a woman said to belong to an older world of rivers and mountain spirits. Her story is not recorded like a deed or hotel bill. It lives as folklore, and that matters. Some versions call her a native princess betrayed by the man she loved. In her sorrow, she cursed the land, binding her grief to the valley before the great resort stood there. Later tellers placed her spirit among the polished rooms where she appears in a white wedding dress. The name Sacco itself belongs to the region's landscape, flowing through the White Mountains and into old stories long before luxury travelers arrived. That makes the legend feel less like a hotel tale and more like a memory beneath it. Visitors may see chandeliers and red roofs, but outside are dark ridges, winter winds, and trails where older stories could hide. So Princess Sacco is best understood as a mountain legend wearing a ghostly shape. Maybe she is not a proven person from history. Maybe she is the way the land reminds visitors that it had a soul before railroads and grand hotels. When the resort windows glow at night, people still imagine a white figure crossing the hall. Number 18, Elizabeth Pierce. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 1717. Elizabeth Hall. Pierce was buried in the Point of Graves burial ground, one of the oldest cemeteries in the city. Her stone says she was the wife of Joshua Pierce and died in the 42nd year of her age. Around her rest merchants, sea captains, families, and children from a port town shaped by ships and hard winters. The burial ground itself dates to the late 1600s, near the Piscataqua River and old waterfront streets. It is small, but it feels crowded with history. Slate stones lean in rows, carved with skulls, wings, and warnings from a time when death was part of daily speech. At night, those old symbols can look almost alive under a street lamp. Elizabeth became the cemetery's best-known gentle spirit. Visitors have reported footsteps behind them, a soft touch, or even a light push near her grave, as if someone wants them to turn back and notice. Some local ghost tellers say she does not mean harm. She only wants to be remembered among the many names fading from the stones. Elizabeth Pierce was not a queen or a famous soldier. She was a woman from early Portsmouth, and her marker still asks the living to pause. When the town noise falls away and the river air slips through the burial ground, that unseen push feels less like fear and more like a request. Do not pass by too quickly. Stop, read, remember at dusk. Number 19, Mr. Sprague. Chesterfield, New Hampshire, 1891. Winter had sealed Lily Pond in Pisgah's deep woods with ice. Lafayette Sprague, a Civil War veteran remembered in local stories as Mr. Sprague, went out near the pond during the cold season and never returned to ordinary life. The tale says the ice gave way, and the water took him before help could save him. The cold pond keeps the old accident close in town memory. Pisgah State Park now covers miles of forest, wetlands, old roads, and quiet ponds. But the land was once farms, mills, pastures, and homesteads. That history makes the place feel lived in, even when no house is left standing. On a gray day, Lily Pond can look so still that every ripple feels like a message from below the surface. Hikers have long told of a man across the water wearing a blue Union uniform, the kind a Grand Army of the Republic veteran might wear in memory of the war. He does not call out. He does not wave. He simply sits or stands with a fishing line, peaceful and distant, as if eternity gave him back the hobby he loved. That is why Mr. Sprague's ghost does not feel cruel. His story is about a man lost to cold water, then seen again doing something calm beside it. Maybe the figure is mist, a stump, or the mind turning history into a shape. But when the far shore darkens and the pond goes quiet, people still look for a blue coat that should not be there, waiting beside the water. Number 20, The Orphan Girl. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 1762. The Chase House was built for merchant Stephen Chase and later became one of the grand Georgian homes now preserved at Strawberry Bank. It stood through the Revolution, the Age of Sail, and the slow changes of the old waterfront neighborhood, but its ghost story belongs to a later chapter, when the house served children. In 1881, after the Chase family era ended, the building was given new life as the Chase Home for Children. It cared for young people who had lost parents or needed help in a hard port city. In 1893, records point to a diphtheria outbreak there. 9 children were sick, and a young girl named Carr reportedly died, a small notice for a very sad life. Because of that history, the haunting is often told carefully now. Older rumors claimed a darker death in an upstairs room, but the known record points to illness, not spectacle. Visitors still speak of a young presence, doors locking and unlocking, lights acting strangely, and the feeling that a child is close by, curious about other children who pass through. The Orphan Girl is not a monster story. It is a reminder of how many small lives pass through old houses without leaving much on paper. In the Chase House, polished rooms and museum labels can only tell part of the past. The rest arrives as a click of a door, a flicker of light, and the sense that one little girl still wants to be seen today. Number 21. General Jonathan Moulton. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1726. Jonathan Moulton was born into a seacoast town that measured wealth in land, ships, and influence. He rose from a local trader to a militia officer, served in colonial wars, and later became one of Hampton's most powerful men. By the 1760s, his success was so great that neighbors searched for an explanation. In a small town, a fortune was never quiet. Folklore answered, It said Moulton made a bargain with the devil. Every month his boots would be filled with gold. But the general was clever. He cut the soles from the boots and placed them over a hole in the floor so the coins fell into the cellar below. Each visit made him richer, and each trick made the devil angry in silence. In 1769, Moulton's mansion burned, and the story claimed that fire was revenge. History records the blaze. Folklore added the flames of judgment. Moulton rebuilt, kept his public standing, and died in 1787. Yet even his grave became uncertain in local memory, as if Hampton could never quite decide where the general truly rested. The story stayed close to the ashes. People imagine heavy military boots crossing wooden floors after dark, pacing like a man counting gold he can never spend. Maybe the story grew from envy of wealth. Maybe it was a warning about greed. But in Hampton, Jonathan Moulton still walks between history, rumor, and fire. Number 22, Abigail Moulton. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1775. Abigail Moulton, the first wife of General Jonathan Moulton, died after 26 years of marriage. Some accounts say smallpox carried her away inside the great house he had rebuilt after the 1769 fire. In a town full of rumors about his gold, her death gave people another story to whisper. Her name stayed tied to the old house. Soon after, Jonathan married Sarah Emery, who had helped nurse Abigail during her illness. The remarriage may have been ordinary by 18th century standards, but Hampton folklore made it feel uneasy. The tale says Jonathan gave Abigail's ring and bracelets to his new bride, as if the past could be moved from one wrist to another. Then came the famous ghostly visit, later preserved by John Greenleaf Whittier in The New Wife and the Old. On the wedding night, Abigail's spirit was said to enter the chamber cold and quiet. She reached for the jewelry, removed it from Sarah's hand and arm, and took back what had belonged to her in life. The poem made local rumor feel almost formal. It is a story about memory refusing to be replaced. The mansion, the second wife, the old jewels, and the frozen touch all turn grief into a warning. In Hampton, people still imagine Abigail stepping from the dark, not to harm the living, but to claim the one part of herself that no one had the right to give away. Number 23, The Lady in White. Durham, New Hampshire, 1908. Smith Hall opened at what is now the University of New Hampshire as the campus's first dormitory built for women. Before that, many female students had to find rooms away from campus or commute from home. The building was not meant to be spooky. It was meant to give young women a safer place to study and sleep. That history is why the Lady in White feels connected to Smith Hall. For generations, students had told stories of a pale woman moving through the dorm at night, appearing in halls, vanishing near stairways, or checking on rooms while students sleep. Some versions also place her near Tea Hall, where old campus paths make the night feel long. The halls listened. UNH archivists have noted that the legend is old, but not fixed. Some students say the woman lived in Smith between the 1920s and 1940s. Others tell it as a guardian story, not a tragedy. The details change because college ghost stories travel by whispers, late-night walks, and nervous laughter after lights go out. Each class leaves its own version behind. That is what makes The Lady in White last. She belongs to a campus where real history and student memory overlap. A building made to protect women became home to a figure who still seems to watch over them. When footsteps cross an empty hall after midnight, students do not always run. Sometimes they listen, wondering if she is only making sure they are safe. Number 24, Mary the Innkeeper. Cornish, New Hampshire. The Smith Hill Inn sits in a quiet corner of the Connecticut River Valley, where old roads, farms, and stone walls make the past feel close. Its roots are usually traced back to the 1700s, when inns and taverns were not just places to sleep. They were newsrooms, shelters, and warm stops between hard miles. Cornish later drew artists and summer guests. The ghost most often named there is Mary, remembered as a former innkeeper or owner. Local legend says she knew herbs, household cures, and old folk practices that later visitors turned into talk of witchcraft. That word sounds frightening now, but in many rural communities it often meant a woman who understood plants, weather, and pain. Mary's signs are said to be gentle. Guests have reported the scent of lavender drifting through rooms when no flowers are near, soft movements in empty spaces, and the feeling of being watched without fear. Unlike darker tales, this one feels tied to hospitality. Even as a ghost, Mary seems to keep the house calm. The scent is gentle, but it stays with people. Buildings like Smith Hill held travelers when roads were rough and winters were long. A good innkeeper had to notice everything: the fire, the food, the tired stranger at the door. If Mary still lingers, the legend says she is not there to frighten anyone. She is simply keeping her rooms ready. Number 25, Bobby the Boy. Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, 1837. The Amos J. Blake House was built as a store with living quarters attached, the kind of place where business and family life shared the same floors. Amos Blake purchased it in 1865, practiced law there, served his town, and became a figure in the Monadnock region. Today, it is a museum. Its clapboard walls still face the common. Inside those rooms, visitors come for history, but many leave talking about Bobby. He is the boy spirit often reported in the house, playful rather than frightening. People have told of toys moving by themselves, flashlights turning on, chains shifting, and the quick sense of a child watching from near the floor or a doorway. The air can feel oddly sweet. The legend sits beside other Blake House stories, including a phantom cat and older presences tied to the building's long life. That makes Bobby feel less like a single jump scare and more like part of a crowded memory. A 19th century house held births, work, illness, errands, family worries, and small moments that never made it into books. He does not roar through the museum. He plays. A toy changes place. A light flickers. A visitor hears something small and turns too late. In a house built for everyday life, the haunting feels every day too. Bobby reminds people that history was not only made by adults, children left echoes in old rooms as well. Number 26. The Ghost Ship, William Tell. Hampton Beach, New Hampshire, 1921. The William Tell was a coastal coal vessel working the old New England trade. Before oil and electricity changed daily life, coal warmed homes, shops, and boarding houses through hard winters. When the ship went down near Hampton, the wreck was real, and locals later remembered pieces of fuel washing ashore. The ghost story came later in 1938, during Hampton's 300th anniversary parade. Floats rolled through town to honor local history, but photographs seemed to show one strange entry no official had registered. It looked like a ship on a flatbed, drawn by horses, and people began to say the William Tell had returned for the celebration. That detail makes the legend unusual. This was not a ghost seen in fog at sea, but a phantom vessel appearing on land, in the middle of public parade. Maybe someone forgot paperwork. Maybe a float was misidentified years later. Or maybe Hampton's old wreck found a playful way to sail one more time before the town. The wreck belonged to a practical world of cargo, cold weather, and working boats. The ghost belongs to the town that kept telling the story. When Hampton Beach turns gray and the tide pulls back, people can still imagine a coal ship waiting just beyond the edge of ordinary history, its silent deck riding the shore mist again at dawn. Number 27. The Blue Lady. Wilton, New Hampshire. Vale End Cemetery began as an old burying ground in the 1700s, when the town was still young and families marked graves with simple stones. Later expanded and renamed in the 1800s, it became a place where Revolutionary War veterans, early settlers, children, and local families rested under tall trees and quiet paths. The grave most often linked to legend belongs to Mary Ritter Spalding. She died in 1808 at only 35 years old, after having 7 children in about 10 years. Her husband, Captain Isaac Spalding, later remarried, and the two Marys were buried in the same family plot. That small human detail gives the story a sorrowful edge. People call her the Blue Lady. Some say she appears as a blue glow rising from the ground, shaped almost like a person. Others describe a woman in old-fashioned dress moving between the stones. Local tellers also remember Mary as kind, church-going, and skilled with herbs, which may be why her spirit feels more watchful than wicked. That is the strange beauty of Vale End Cemetery. It holds real names, real dates, and real grief. But at night, the story turns blue. Maybe the light is mist, moonshine, or the mind trying to give shape to sadness. Still, visitors look toward Mary's grave and lower their voices. In Wilton, the Blue Lady is not just a ghost. She is a memory that learned to glow, soft and lonely, after the gates go still. Number 28. Susanna Smith. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1680. Susanna Smith died in a way so sudden that her grave kept the shock in stone. Old records place her in Pine Grove Cemetery, wife of Robert Smith, an early settler connected to Exeter and Hampton. Her marker carried a hard old phrase, often remembered as slain with thunder. That meant lightning, or thunder in the language of the time, had taken her life. In the 1600s, such a death did not feel ordinary. Puritan New England watched the sky for signs, and storms could be read as warnings from God, nature, or both. Susanna's grave became more than a family marker. It became a strange lesson cut into stone. Over the years, coastal sand and soil seemed to play with the grave. Stories say the marker disappeared beneath the earth, then returned when weather shifted and the ground opened again. That simple movement made people talk. A woman killed by the sky now seemed hidden and revealed by the land itself, as if storm and cemetery were still speaking. That is why Susanna Smith's legend feels so old and bare. There is no white figure in a window, no long speech from the dead. There is only a date, a storm, and a stone that people say would not stay put. At Pine Grove Cemetery, the past feels as if it rises and sinks with the dirt. And when thunder rolls over Hampton, her name still feels carved into the weather, waiting beneath every flash of light in the darker ground. Number 29, The Mountain Spirit Girl. Pinkham Notch, New Hampshire, Glen Ellis Falls. Drops through the White Mountain Forest near Mount Washington, where the Ellis River plunges into a cold pool below. Long before tourists parked beside Route 16, the ravines, cliffs, and streams carried older stories. One of the gentlest tells of a girl who vanished into the mountain. In the legend, an indigenous family lived near Tuckerman Ravine. One day, the girl went out among berries, rocks, and spruce, then did not return. Her parents searched the rough ground and listened near the water, but the mountain gave back no footprint, no torn cloth, and no answer. The child seemed to have stepped beyond the human trail. Later, hunters saw her near Glen Ellis Falls beside a tall, shining mountain spirit. She was not crying. She looked peaceful, as if the wild place had claimed her kindly and made her part of itself. Then the two figures faded into mist. From that moment, the lost child was remembered, not as gone, but as changed. Glen Ellis Falls is a real place of thunder, spray, and stone steps, but the legend gives the water a face. On moonlit nights, people imagine a small reflection near the pool, too still to be a wave. Maybe it is only light, but in the White Mountains, even light can feel like someone watching from the old world, waiting until the falls grow quiet. Number 30, The Elderly Residents. Concord, New Hampshire, 1876. The Centennial Home opened on Pleasant Street with a purpose that still feels kind. It was created by local charity to give elderly people, especially those with few resources, a safe and comfortable place to live. At the time, it was one of the early homes of its kind in New Hampshire. The need grew so quickly that the first building was replaced in 1892 by the larger brick structure people know today. For decades, it housed older residents, many of them women. and the place served the community until 1994. After renovation, it became the Centennial Hotel, a boutique inn with turrets, warm rooms, and a polished restaurant. The haunting matches the building's history. Guests and staff have spoken of soft shadows near the entrance, quiet figures by the towers, and the feeling of elderly residents still moving through familiar halls. These are not wild or angry ghosts. They feel settled, as if some people were so grateful for shelter that they never fully left. Its past was not built on battle or crime, but on care. The old home gave people warmth at the end of life, and the hotel still carries that gentleness in its brick and stairways. When a shadow crosses a hallway after dark, it feels less like a warning than a resident taking one more slow walk beneath the old lights at night.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.
Number 1. Pali Highway. It cuts through the green cliffs of the island. By day, it carries workers, families, and tourists between the city and the windward side. But local drivers still repeat one warning before crossing the high pass. Do not carry pork across the mountain pass. The story sounds small until a car stalls in mist, with no clear reason. The old legend says the fire goddess and a powerful pig spirit once divided the island after a bitter struggle. Pork became a sign of that spirit, and carrying it across the boundary was like dragging an old quarrel into forbidden ground. Some drivers say the engine dies, the lights fade, or an old woman appears with a dog waiting quietly near the road. History gives the place an even deeper weight. These cliffs were part of a major battle in 1795, when the king fought to unite the islands. Warriors were driven toward the cliffs, and the wind there still feels like it is rushing through that day. So the pork legend is not just a joke. It belongs to a road marked by power, war, and respect. That is why it feels different after sunset. The city lights shrink behind you, the mountains close in, and the car seems smaller than it did before. Maybe a stalled engine is only bad luck. Number 2. Saddle Road. The road crosses the Big Island between two giant volcanoes. The route was first built during World War II as a military access road, and for years it had a rough, lonely reputation. Even today, after modern improvements, the high, open land can feel empty enough to swallow sound. At dusk, it still seems to float above the island. This is where people tell of fireballs in the sky. Some describe them as red or white lights sliding low over the brush, then rising like sparks from unseen hands. Others say they hover in place, too steady for a meteor and too strange for headlights. Drivers slow down, stare through the windshield, and wonder whether the mountain is sending a warning. The stories became stronger in the 1950s when fireball reports were linked in local memory to volcanic unrest in the Eastern District. The great 1955 eruption lasted for weeks, opened many vents, damaged roads, and sent lava through settled land. To scientists, eruptions are tracked through quakes, cracks, and gas. To many families, The lights were the older language of the island. That mix of history and legend is what makes the road so powerful. It is not a crowded ghost tour road. It is a quiet crossing between mountains that shaped everything below. When a glow moves across the dark plain, the driver feels both wonder and caution. The road keeps going, but for a moment, the island seems to look back. Number 3, Polly Drive. This drive winds through one of the island's greenest valleys, where old trees lean over the pavement. The road carried traffic before the modern highway took over, and its sharpest bend became known as Morgan's Corner. In daylight, it can look peaceful. At night, drivers say a white figure sometimes enters a car without a door opening. The bend took its name from a doctor named James Morgan, whose home stood near the bend in the 1920s. But the road's darker fame grew after March 11th, 1948, when Therese Wilder was attacked in her nearby home by 2 escaped prisoners. The crime frightened the nearby city and helped stir long public arguments about punishment, justice, and what fear can do to a community. Over time, the real tragedy mixed with older valley legends. People reported cold spots, whispers, and the feeling of someone sitting in the back seat. Some speak of a silent woman in white. Others warn of a face appearing in the mirror just after the curve. The details change, but the setting always stays the same. Wet leaves, narrow pavement, and a turn that feels too tight. That is why the famous corner remains one of the island's best-known road hauntings. It is not scary only because of ghosts. It is scary because a real place with real names and real sorrow became a doorway for rumor. Number 4, Road to Hana. This famous road begins like a promise. Ocean on one side, jungle on the other, and water hidden behind trees. Yet this famous island drive is not a simple beach road. It is about 52 miles from the main town to the eastern coast, with 620 curves and 59 bridges. Many are narrow, and several are only one lane. So every mile asks drivers to slow down and pay attention. Because the trip moves through old valleys, waterfalls, and quiet coastal settlements, the road has gathered stories for generations. Travelers speak of a sudden heavy silence inside the car, even with the windows open. A laugh stops, the radio fades. Then someone feels watched from the thick leaves, as if the forest noticed them before they noticed it. The history underneath the pavement makes that feeling stronger. Long before rental cars and guidebooks, families lived and traveled along these eastern lands. Old footpaths, farming areas, burial places, and temple sites once tied the coastline together. The modern highway opened the view to visitors, but it did not erase the older world beneath the green. So the haunting of this road is not a ghost with one name. It is the feeling that the road is still shared. A bridge creaks, rain slides across the windshield, and the next curve appears before the last one is finished. Number 5, Tantalus Drive. This drive climbs above the city in tight loops. trading city noise for mist, trees, and coast views. The road began as a rough mountain route in the 1890s, later joined with Round Top Drive, and was paved in the 1930s. By daylight, it is one of the island's great scenic drives. After dark, the same curves can feel like they are calling drivers deeper uphill. The old stories speak of voices near the drop-offs. Some still hear their name called from the brush. Others see a pale shape standing near a bend, gone by the time headlights reach it. The legend warns people not to follow sounds into the trees, because the mountain is steep, the road is narrow, and one wrong step can become a real danger. The mountain road also carries a modern sorrow. In January 1982, 19-year-old Lisa Au disappeared during a stormy night on the island. Her car was later found abandoned, and days afterward she was found near the mountain road. No one was ever convicted. The case troubled the island for years, partly because people wondered how a familiar road could hide such a hard secret. That is why the ghost stories here feel heavier than simple campfire tales. The mountain road has beauty, history, and a silence that changes after sunset. Number 6. Tunnel of Trees. The tree tunnel on the island begins as a green doorway. It runs along the main road, the route many people take toward the south coast. In 1911, Walter McBride, a sugar and pineapple businessman, gave hundreds of eucalyptus trees to the community. More than a century later, their trunks still rise like columns, turning the road into shade. The haunting here is gentle but strange. Late drivers say the air under the canopy feels colder, even when the day has been warm. Some hear soft taps against the car, as if fingers brush the doors. Others see lights far ahead that never get closer, then blink out between the trees. No one jumps from the shadows. The road simply seems to notice you. The trees have lived through real damage too. A powerful hurricane struck the island in 1992 and tore through the island with terrible force, ripping branches and breaking parts of the canopy. Yet the tunnel slowly grew back. That survival became part of its mood. It is beautiful, but it also carries the memory of plantation days, storms, workers, and passing cars. So the tree tunnel feels less like a monster story and more like a threshold. Number 7. Kappa Quarry Road. This road sits away from the postcard shine of the island. During the day, it looks like a practical back road, with brush, work yards, wetlands, and rough edges. At night, it changes. The lanes feel narrow, the trees crowd the shoulders, and the dark patches between streetlights seem deep enough to hide someone waiting. That is where the vanishing hitchhiker stories begin. Drivers tell of a wet, tired figure standing near the road, sometimes close to the marshy ground. The passenger gives a short direction, sits quietly in the back seat, then disappears before the car reaches the next turn. When the driver looks again, there is no open door, no sound, and no footprints. Older folklore adds another layer. In island tradition, old island stories describe small hidden people known as builders and tricksters, tied to remote valleys, fish ponds, and places away from crowds. Around this back road, some stories say they stretch the road, confuse headlights, or make a driver feel as if the same bend has appeared twice in a row. The road's real danger keeps the legend grounded. Sharp turns, poor visibility, and fast driving have made it frightening without any ghost at all. That may be why the stories stay. A lonely road already teaches respect. Add a silent passenger who vanishes behind you, and every mirror becomes important. Number 8. Kalaupapa Bypass Road. On the island, the roads near the isolated settlement carry a history heavier than most places in Hawaii. Beginning in the 1860s, people with Hansen's disease were sent to this isolated peninsula, cut off by ocean on one side and high cliffs on the other. Families were separated, homes were left behind, and a quiet settlement grew from sorrow and courage. One local ghost story centers on a grove marked by a ilang-ilang tree between the old and newer settlements. People said a figure floated near the road ruts, solid from the shoulders up but fading below. The story grew so strong that drivers preferred a bypass rather than pass the haunted spot at night. Even a trained mule was said to refuse the grove. The legend matters because animals and residents often knew the land better than outsiders. The settlement was never just a sad place. It was also a community where patients built churches, cared for one another, farmed, worked, and made lives under rules they did not choose. Father Damien arrived in 1873, adding a real name to a place often reduced to rumor and fog. This road does not ask visitors to be thrilled. It asks them to be careful. The ghost near the tree may be a memory, a warning, or only a shadow made by moonlight. But in this place, even shadows deserve respect. The road bends around the grove, and the story bends around grief that never fully leaves. Number 9. Highway 1/H1. H1 is the busy spine of the island, carrying cars past Pearl Harbor, Honolulu, neighborhoods, shops, and airport traffic. The island's interstate routes were approved after statehood, and H1 grew from older freeway plans in the 1950s and 1960s. Most drivers know it for traffic, not ghosts. But on the island, modern roads often cross land with older memory. The tunnel haunting people connect to this route is often told with the mountain highways that link back toward H1. Workers on the island's road projects spoke of uneasy valleys, old burials, and voices near places where the mountains had to be cut. The H3 freeway, opened in 1997 after decades of argument, became controversial for crossing sacred ground. That history changed the way people heard the tunnels. A drip of water became a whisper. Air rushing through concrete sounded like marching. Some said they heard warriors crying from the dark, not angry at every driver, but present where machines had entered the mountain. Whether the sounds were spirits, the fear came from a question: can a road cut through memory? The danger is not a lonely forest, but the speed of life. Thousands pass without thinking about what lies beneath the lanes. Then a tunnel grows quiet for 1 second, and the driver feels small inside the concrete. The road moves forward, but the island seems to ask who paid the price. Number 10. Waipio Valley Access Road. The road into the remote valley drops from the lookout like a line drawn down a cliff. It is short, steep, and demanding, with sections so sharp that only experienced local drivers and four-wheel drive vehicles belong there. Visitors know the valley for its beauty, but history gives it a deeper name: the Valley of the Kings. For centuries, the valley was a political and spiritual center on the Big Island. The future king spent part of his youth connected to this region, and many chiefs lived or ruled from the valley. Farm fields, waterfalls, and old paths made it rich and protected. When night comes, that royal past is the reason people speak of drums echoing from the valley floor. The drums are linked to the night marchers, the ghostly guards of high chiefs. In the stories, they travel old routes with torches, chants, and steady steps. On the steep road, a driver may hear the beat before seeing anything at all. The sound rises from below, rolls between the cliffs, and makes the steep pavement feel like the edge of another world. The real road has its own warnings too. Rockfalls, landslides, and safety concerns have closed or limited access in recent years, reminding everyone that the valley cannot be treated like an easy stop. Number 11. Botanical Garden Roads. It sits in the center of the island, where rain and shade make the air feel cooler than the coast. The Botanical Garden Roads curve around a deep green ravine, now a 27-acre forest garden. Its roots go back to the sugar planters, who used the land as an experimental arboretum before it became a public garden. That quiet history is why the Green Lady feels tied to the place. In the most common story, she was once a mother walking near the gulch when one of her children disappeared. She searched through rain, mud, and thick leaves until grief changed her into something people still fear. Drivers and walkers later described a green figure moving near the road. Parents used the legend as a warning, but it also fits the real landscape. The ravine is beautiful, yet it drops away fast, and the plants grow thick enough to hide the ground. A child who wandered from the path could be lost from sight in seconds. Over time, that practical lesson became a ghost with wet hair, mossy skin, and eyes fixed on the shadows. So the roads near the botanical garden do not need screaming to feel haunted. They only need rain on leaves and a turn where the trees close overhead. The Green Lady may be a spirit, a warning, or a mother-shaped memory of the gulch itself. Number 12. La Perouse Bay, Coastal Paths. At the far end of the road on the island's south coast, this remote bay feels like the island has changed its voice. The green slopes give way to black lava, sharp rocks, and bright ocean. The bay was named after a French explorer who reached the island in 1786. But the land was old long before any foreign ship saw it. The coastal paths here cross some of the youngest lava on the island. Scientists once thought the flow came from about 1790, but newer studies point much earlier, between about 1480 and 1600. That makes the stone feel ancient and recent at the same time. It is young enough for the island to remember, but old enough to carry centuries of footsteps. This is why night marcher stories fit so naturally along the shore. People speak of distant drumming, torch-like lights, and the sound of shells on the wind. In the dark, the broken lava can make every step sound like someone walking behind you. Then the ocean pulls back, the air stills, and the path feels as if another procession has claimed it. This remote bay is not a place that invites careless wandering after sunset. Its beauty is rough, bright, and serious. The legend does not turn the coast into a monster. It gives the coast a boundary. When the rocks glow under moonlight and the sea breathes through the cracks, it feels wise to leave the old road to those who walked it first. Number 13. Cana Point Paths. This remote point is the western tip of the island, where the road gives up and the rest must be done on foot. The land feels open and exposed, with ocean on two sides and wind coming hard across the lava shore. Today it is known for native birds, monk seals, and a wild coastline, but its older meaning is much deeper than scenery. For generations, island families regarded this point as a sacred place where souls left the living world. Stories say the spirits of the newly dead traveled west, reached the edge of land, and leaped into the next realm to meet their ancestors. That belief makes every path here feel like more than a hiking trail. It is a border between this life and the unseen. Night marcher stories also gather at this coastal point. Hikers have reported drums, low chanting, and torch-like lights moving where no group should be walking. Some say the processions escort souls. Others say the warrior spirits protect the route. Either way, the message is the same. The living should not stand in the way when the old passage opens. In daylight, the sea is blue, the birds call, and the trail feels wide. At dusk, the western sky burns down, and the land seems to face another world. A person can still explain the lights and sounds as wind, waves, or tired eyes. But out there, at the edge of the island, even doubt speaks softly. Number 14. Hanapepe Town Roads. This is one of the island's old towns, tucked near the river on the island's west side. Unlike many towns shaped mainly by sugar plantations, the town grew with its own strong identity. In 1840, the United States exploring expedition visited the area, and by the early 1900s, the town had become a busy place of stores, bridges, workers, and families. Its famous swinging bridge adds to the mood. Built around 1911, it helped people cross the local river toward fields and homes on the other side. A powerful hurricane damaged it in 1992, but the bridge was restored, and the town kept its old look. That mix of survival and age gives the town a feeling that the past is still close to the street. After dark, the roads collect a different kind of story. People tell of night marchers passing through town, not far away in a valley, but near streets where shops and homes stand. The sound may begin as a low rhythm, then grow into voices that seem to press against the walls. For a moment, the modern town feels covered by an older map. That is what makes the town's haunting special. It is not only a lonely road or a hidden trail. It is a living town where art nights, families, and history share space with legend. Number 15. Snake Road. Snake Road twists between the center of the island and the North Shore, earning the nickname Snake Road. It is narrow in places, dark at night, and easy to misjudge after rain, especially between army land and country fields. Even without a ghost, the drive asks for care. In recent years, state officials added speed control work after a record of crashes there. The legend says a bride was late for her wedding at an old church, and a priest drove her through the curves too fast. Near one bend, the car lost control, and the wedding became a roadside ghost story. Since then, drivers have spoken of a woman in white near the shoulder, sometimes with a priest beside her, asking for a ride that never reaches its end. The details shift with each teller. Some say she appears in the mirror. Others say a seatbelt warning or crash alert sounds when no one else is there. The fear works because the road already has real danger built into it. Headlights sweep trees, wet pavement shines like glass, and every curve hides what is next. So Snake Road is a place where folklore and safety point in the same direction. Slow down, watch the shoulders, respect the dark. Maybe the white figure is only mist lifting from the fields, and maybe the old wedding story grew from ordinary accidents. Number 16. Hokonui Paths. These paths cross one of the quietest parts of the island, where red dust rises from old roads and the wind seems louder than traffic. The island was lived on long before plantations arrived, with fishing villages, stone sites, and trails that connected shore, upland, and dry country. Here distance still feels powerful after sunset too. The legend says that after dark, footsteps sometimes follow these paths with no person in sight. Travelers hear a slow march in the dust, then a pause, as if unseen men have stopped to listen. Some say the sounds belong to old warriors still guarding roots that once mattered to chiefs, fishermen, and families moving across the island. History gives the story its shape. The island later became famous for pineapple, especially after large plantation work began in 1922. But older ancient villages show a much deeper past. That ancient village, occupied since at least the 1400s, held homes, religious sites, petroglyphs, and a place of refuge visited by important Hawaiian leaders. There are no bright hotel lights, no crowded sidewalks, and no easy noise to explain every sound. Only dust, dry grass, and a path that keeps its own rhythm. When footsteps seem to rise behind a walker, the island does not feel empty. It feels protected, as if the old road still knows who belongs there now. Number 17. Makaha Valley Plantation Paths. This western valley lies on the west side of the island, where the mountains rise steep and dry above the coast. Old plantation paths and rural roads cut through land that feels far from the city, even on the same island. In daylight, the valley is bright and open to the sea. At night, The ridges turn black, and every sound seems to carry farther. The haunting here belongs to the night marchers. Residents have long told of drums moving through the valley, followed by points of torchlight that appear between trees and vanish near the slopes. Sometimes the sound comes first, a steady beat that does not match any car, party, or radio. Then the air feels crowded, as if a line is passing. The legend fits the valley because the island's western side holds many old trails, caves, and sacred places. Before modern roads, these routes connected shore communities with upland areas and carried food, news, and power. Later plantation life added workers, fences, and fields, but it did not erase the older paths. The land kept both histories. That is why people speak carefully about the valley after dark. The story is not about a ghost trying to scare strangers for fun. It is about guards still walking a route they were ordered to protect. Number 18. Old Saddle Road. Old Saddle Road once felt much rougher than the modern route across the island. Built first as a wartime military road in the 1940s, it crossed high lava country between two giant volcanoes, far from towns and fuel stops. At night, the sky opened wide above it, and the land on both sides looked unfinished. One of its best-known ghost stories came from the Macumber family on January 31st, 1955. They reported strange lights on the road, then something unseen pressing against their truck and tapping on the roof. The fear did not end when they reached home. In the story, a force held two family members inside the vehicle until salt was thrown into the truck. The timing made the tale even stronger. That same year, a major eruption began in the Eastern District, and many island residents connected ghost lights and fireballs with volcanic warning signs. Some believed the spirits were angry because trees had been cut and land disturbed. Others thought the lights were part of the volcano goddess's world, moving before lava returned. The old road is quieter now, but the story still rides with it. A lonely road, a frightened family, salt in the dark, and a mountain landscape that never feels fully asleep. Maybe the tapping was wind, metal, or panic after a long drive. Number 19. Pearl Harbor Access Roads. The roads into the harbor do not feel haunted in the usual way. They pass gates, docks, memorial signs, and water that looks calm under the sun, especially near the memorial. Yet everyone who enters is moving across a place changed forever on December 7th, 1941, when Japanese aircraft attacked and the United States was pulled into World War II. The legends here speak of soldiers seen near the docks, a woman waiting for a man who never came home, and footsteps along quiet access roads after visiting hours near the shore. Some guards and visitors have described a sudden sadness that arrives without warning. It is not a jump scare. It feels more like grief standing beside the road. History explains why the stories are treated with care. More than 2,300 American service members were killed that day, and 1,177 died aboard the USS Arizona alone. Ships burned, planes were destroyed, and families across the country learned names they would never hear at the dinner table again. The harbor became a memory carved into water. So the access roads should never be treated like a place for thrill-seeking. If a figure seems to stand near the harbor lights, the right feeling is respect, not excitement. Some hauntings are not about fear at all. They are about remembering lives interrupted in one morning. Number 20. Kalawao Trail. This remote settlement is tied to one of the hardest chapters in Hawaii's history. In 1866, the first people with Hansen's disease were sent to the remote north shore of the island, separated by sea cliffs and ocean. The early settlement was on the isolated coast itself, where help was limited, supplies were thin, and many families never saw each other again. The trail carries a local story about the remains of an old house from the 1870s. Friends had built it for a patient, trying to give one person a little safety in a place filled with loss. But the story says jealousy and violence ended that kindness, and the ground around the house kept the sorrow. Visitors later felt heaviness near the site. Real history makes the legend even more painful. Father Damien arrived in 1873 and worked to improve homes, churches, care, and dignity for the people forced to live there. The two settlements were not just places of sickness. They were communities where people worshiped, married, worked, planted gardens, and tried to build normal days. That is why the haunting on this old trail is quiet. It is not the kind that asks for screams. It asks for silence. A fallen wall, a patch of grass, and a sudden weight in the chest can say more than a loud ghost ever could. Number 21. Waikiki/Hilton Hawaiian Village Roads. The roads around the famous beach district look too bright for ghost stories. Buses pass, music drifts from hotels, and visitors walk toward the beach with towels over their shoulders. Yet the large hotel district sits on land with a much older past. Before the towers, this shoreline was part of an older coastal district, close to ponds, streams, and royal waters. The modern hotel story began with a small hotel opened in 1928. In 1954, Henry Kaiser and Fritz Burns bought the property, and by 1955 they were building the large resort with cottages, gardens, pools, and showrooms. The place became famous for color, crowds, and entertainment. Still, staff stories tell of a woman in red moving where no guest should be. Many connect her to the fire goddess, who is said to test people while wearing a human face. In some accounts, she crosses a hallway or beach path, looks directly at a worker or traveler, then vanishes before anyone can speak. In 1959, one employee story described a young woman disappearing in a blink, leaving only shock behind her. That is what makes this road haunting so unusual. It is not hidden in a forest or locked behind an old gate. It walks through one of the busiest places in Hawaii. Neon signs shine, the sea keeps moving, and the hotel doors open and close. Then a red dress slips past the corner, and the beach district feels older than every tower around it. Number 22. Pohoiki Road. It runs through the Eastern District, a district where the Big Island reminds everyone that the ground is alive. Forest, lava, coast, and small communities all sit within reach of an active volcanic rift zone. A road here is never just pavement. It is a line drawn over land that can crack, steam, and change the map in a single season. The legend speaks of glowing orbs and fireballs drifting above the brush. Some witnesses call them spirit lights. Others see them as warnings from the land before fire returns from below. Local accounts name Richard Lyman and Lily Torrey among those who noticed strange lights connected in memory to volcanic unrest. The lights seem to move with purpose, then vanish. The history behind that fear is real. On February 28, 1955, lava broke out near the main coastal road. Fountains rose, cracks opened, roads were cut, and families near a coastal community had to evacuate. The eruption continued for weeks across the lower district. Science explains the quakes and fissures, but legend explains why people watch the dark sky with worry. That is why this road feels haunted without needing a single walking ghost. A small light in the trees can become a message. A warm wind can feel like breath from the island itself. When drivers see a glow over the brush, they may keep both hands still on the wheel. In this district, the road is not dead ground. It is a living warning. Number 23, Hawaii Plantation Village Paths. This plantation village museum is built to remember the sugar plantation era from about 1850 to 1950. The outdoor museum opened in 1992 and uses restored buildings, replicas, tools, rooms, and everyday objects to show how workers and families lived. Its paths look simple, but they carry many countries, languages, and hard lives in one place. Laborers came from Hawaiian, Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Korean, Okinawan, Portuguese, Puerto Rican, and other communities. They cut cane, washed clothes, raised children, shared food, and worked under strict plantation rules. The houses were small, the hours were long, and the people often gave more to the islands than history books remembered. That is why the ghost stories here feel personal. Visitors speak of children crying in empty rooms, footsteps on porches, and light touches where no guide is standing. Some say at least half the houses feel active. But the haunting is not cruel. It feels like a village full of people who still want their ordinary days to be seen. Walking these paths is like moving through a memory built from wood, dust, and family stories. A door creaks, a curtain shifts, and a tiny room suddenly feels full. Maybe it is only the wind passing through old boards. But at Hawaii Plantation Village, the past does not feel buried. Number 24, Town Roads. It is the main town of the island, quiet enough that a visitor may notice how little rush there is. The main street was named for a nearby house used by a Hawaiian king in the 1860s. Shops, bakeries, harbor views, and island errands give the town a calm rhythm that feels very different from larger Hawaiian cities. Yet local legends say the town roads are spiritually busy after dark. In many night marcher stories, the old processions stay in valleys or along coast trails. In the town, people say they may pass near the heart of town itself. First comes a faint drum, then chanting seems to move between buildings, soft at first, then close. History helps the story feel possible. The island has long been known for deep respect toward older ways, family lines, and sacred places. The town also grew around harbor life, trade, and travel, with roads laid over land that already had older paths. A modern street can follow a route much older than the buildings beside it. That is why it feels different at night. It is not frightening because it is loud or ruined. It is frightening because it is peaceful, and the peace lets small sounds travel. When the last bakery light goes out and the road lies empty, a drum beat in the distance feels impossible to ignore. The town sleeps, but the old procession may still be walking. Number 25, Nuanu Pali, Lookout Access. The access road to the cliffside lookout climbs toward one of the island's strongest views. Wind rushes over the cliffs, clouds move fast, and the island opens below in green ridges and blue water. Tourists come for photos, but the lookout is more than scenery. It is tied to one of the most important battles in Hawaiian history. In May 1795, the island king fought a major battle during his campaign to unite the islands. His forces pushed the island's defenders up the valley toward the steep cliffs. Many warriors were trapped between weapons behind them and the drop ahead. Historical estimates say hundreds died at or near the high cliffs. That is why people report shadows on the access road after dark. Some see forms moving against the wind, as if men are still climbing toward the last edge. Others hear cries or the pound of feet that vanish when cars stop. The stories are not random. They rise from a place where a real battle ended with fear, loss, and a new future for Hawaii. Number 26, Mackenzie State Park Trails. The coastal park sits on the rugged eastern coast where ironwood trees bend over black lava cliffs and the ocean hits hard below. The park is about 13 acres, but it feels larger in the wind. It was named for a young forest ranger. A young forest ranger remembered for planting trees to protect the shoreline from erosion. The trails are also tied to the old coastal route, often called the King's Trail. Long before park signs and picnic tables, people traveled these rough lava paths between communities, fishing spots, and sacred places. At night, local stories say the old road still belongs to the night marchers, the spirit guards who move with drums and steady feet. Visitors have reported chanting near the trees, heavy steps on empty paths, and the feeling that a line of people is passing just out of sight. The ironwoods make the stories stronger. Their thin branches scrape together in the wind, sounding almost like whispers. A camper can wake in the dark and believe the whole grove is breathing. That is why Mackenzie is beautiful, but never simple. The cliffs are dangerous, the sea is powerful, and the history beneath the trail feels older than the park itself. When the wind rises and the path seems to fill with unseen footsteps, the wisest traveler does not challenge the sound. They step away from the old road and let the night keep walking on. Number 27, Old Pali Road. The old mountain road is no longer the main way across the cliffs, but that is part of its power. Pieces of the former road now sit quiet under trees, beside stone walls, wet leaves, and mountain wind. Modern traffic rushes through newer routes nearby, yet this older path feels as if it slipped out of time and kept the silence for itself. The road's deepest shadow comes from the major battle in 1795. The island king fought to bring the island under his rule, and the battle ended near the high cliffs. Warriors were pushed toward the edge, and many died there. More than a century later, during late 1800s road work, workers reportedly found hundreds of skulls near the base of the cliffs. That discovery changed the way people imagined the road. A closed path became a battlefield path. Hikers speak of cold air, sudden sadness, and the sound of movement in places where no one is walking. The cliffs above seem to press down, and the wind can feel like voices coming from far below rather than from the sky. The old mountain road is not haunted because it is abandoned. It is haunted because it remembers a turning point in Hawaiian history. A person can walk there for exercise, but the road asks for more than that. It asks for quiet steps, low voices, and a little humility. Even in daylight, the hush feels earned. The old cracked pavement ends, but the story beneath it never really does now. Number 28, Volcano House, Hotel Entry Road. The entry road to Volcano House leads into the National Volcano Park, where the air cools and the ground feels alive. The hotel has stood in different forms near the summit of the active volcano since 1846, when Benjamin Pittman built a thatched shelter for visitors. Each version has faced the same power, volcano itself. The legend says an old woman sometimes appears near the hotel or along the entry, moving slowly as if she has always belonged there. Others speak of a small white dog that appears at the doorway or near the road, then vanishes before anyone can follow. Many connect both figures to the fire spirit of the volcano. History makes the legend easy to understand. Early travelers came by hard trails and rough roads to stare into the crater, especially when the crater glowed with lava. The hotel changed through the years, burned in 1940, and was rebuilt nearby in 1941. Still, visitors kept returning, drawn by fear, wonder, and the feeling of being watched by the mountain. That is why the entry road feels different from an ordinary hotel driveway. It does not simply lead to rooms and dinner. It leads to one of the world's most active volcanic landscapes, where science and story have always stood side by side. If a white dog crosses the headlights and disappears, the night seems to say, "Enter gently and remember whose home this is." Number 29, International Airport Entry. The road into the airport is full of motion. Cars unload bags, shuttles circle, and travelers hurry toward arrivals and departures. But the airport's history reaches back to March 21st, 1927, when it opened as John Rogers Airport, the island's first full airport. Millions have come and gone through this edge of the city. Airports collect emotion in a special way. They hold reunions, goodbyes, fear of flying, and last looks through windows. That is why the lady-in-waiting story has stayed around the terminals and entry roads. She is said to search the arrivals area for someone who never returns. World War II added another layer. After the Pearl Harbor attack, civilian flying changed, and the field became part of the island's military world before returning to civilian use in 1946. Later, it grew into a major Pacific gateway and was renamed for a longtime United States Senator in 2017. The airport kept changing, but the feeling of waiting never left. So this haunting fits the place perfectly. A ghost at an airport is not trapped in a ruined house. She is trapped in a question. Did he land? Did he leave? Did she miss him forever? Number 30, Yao Theater Roadways. The roads around the old theater run through a historic town where storefronts, old buildings, and mountain clouds sit close together. The theater opened on August 22, 1928, with movie screens, live performances, and a proud place in the island's public life. For nearly a century, people have entered those doors to laugh, sing, and forget the world outside. The ghost stories here are softer than many road legends. People report shadowy figures near the lower levels, voices when no actor is speaking, and movement along the nearby streets after a show has ended. Some say the spirits are not angry. They feel like late guests who still enjoy the stage lights and the sound of applause. Yet the town also stands near older history. The nearby valley, only a short distance inland, was the site of a major battle in 1790, when the invading king's forces fought the island's army during the struggle to unite the islands. That memory gives the region a serious undertone beneath its theater signs and evening traffic. That is why the roadways near the old theater feel layered. One story belongs to music, actors, and glowing marquees. Another belongs to the valley winds and the old fight that changed the island's future. When the street grows quiet after the audience leaves, an extra voice in the dark does not always feel frightening.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.